Hello and welcome to the Athens Women's Football Series live on Facebook. My name is Shon Osimbo. Finally, after days of waiting, we are back with your favorite show about women's football, and I am humbled to be hosting this specific show. Now, quickly, this show will be running every Wednesday. I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, so this will be 9 p.m. here in East Africa, and also we'll be, broadcasting everywhere because we are live on Facebook and live on YouTube. Here is where we'll be having conversation about women's football and its growth as we count down also to the main summit, that is the Athens Women's Football Summit that will happen in Athens, Greece, on the 22nd and 23rd of September this year. So approximately, let's say, 50 days to that major event. Now, women's football is the greatest movement in sport, and it's an opportunity to always celebrate the beautiful game. That's why it is important to have this conversation, and it's happening at the Athens Women's Football Summit, starting with this specific show, Athens Women's Football Series. Now, let's just continue today. I'm so excited already, so I want to introduce our guests for today. But let's see, where recent weeks I have seen the spotlight shine on women's football. Let's just quickly talk about that across online platforms. Last month, we saw South Africa. Let me start with Africa. We saw South Africa lift the Women's African Cup of Nations. That was quite the moment, celebrating after beating Morocco 2-1. And now heading over to Europe, it was such a big deal when England also won its first ever major women's championship, that is beating Germany 2-1 again in the women's Euro to lift the Euro 2022 titles in the women's Euro. So quite an amazing moment, that we saw July, where we had so many people talk about women's football across the whole world. And the topic for today, before I introduce our guest, is the future of Web.3 in women's football. You can't talk about anything right now in the current age without talking about anything digital. Everything is going digital. So how do we adapt in the swiftest way possible to it? And that's why today we have two very special ladies who also kick off the Athens Women's Football Series show. We have Lucy Mills, who's the programs manager, international projects at FC Barcelona, also doubling up as a board member at Lewis FC. And she's also a women's advisor, football advisor, and co-founder Ready. On the other hand, we have Aisha Nazia, also the co-founder of Ready. Welcome, ladies, to the show. I'm very excited to host you all. It's such an important moment. It's such an important topic when it comes to women's football. So quickly, let me just hand it over to you. Let's quickly start with you, Lucy. Talk to us. Who is Lucy, and how far have you come in this industry when it comes to women's football?
Thanks so much, Shona, and thank you so much to the Athens women's football team for enabling us and giving us this opportunity to kick off the Athens Women's Football Summit series. So, I'm Lucy Mills. I'm very happy. I'm actually here with my England flag. Two of my favorite teams, South Africa and England, won their respective regional tournaments. I spent most of my 20s in South Africa. I was working in football around the 2010 FIFA Men's World Cup, and got to know some of the players and the pioneers and the activists in South Africa who have been pushing women's football for years, if not decades. So I was thrilled to see them win the recent AFCON Women's Championships. And equally, I've just come back from London, being at Wembley at this historic match against Germany, which was a long time coming, particularly in light of the many decades ban that English women's football faced in the modern century. So, a little bit of background about me. I'm 37 years old. I've dedicated my entire life, really personal life, professional life, to football. I grew up playing football. I had a typical experience of being a footballer in the UK, which sadly a typical experience, meaning that the opportunities were scarce. And I think that gave me my first feel and experience of being a sports feminist and activist within the space from a very young age. I spent half of my professional career, as I said, working in South Africa around impact football for good, working a lot with women and girls in and through football. And then the latter part of my career, I've been based in Europe. So before this, I was working at a professional football group as the head of women's football. And for the last 4 years, I've been based working within the foundation at Football Club Barcelona, working on the more social impact side of the game. And yeah, we'll talk more about Ready soon. So I hope that gives a good introduction.
Yes, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. Let's now move on to Aisha. Give us more about just your journey into football. Aisha, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Yes.
Once again, thank you, Sean, and thank you to Athens Women's Football Summit for giving Ready this opportunity and inviting me and Lucy to kick off this whole series. Yeah, about me, I am an engineer by background. That is what I thought for the longest part of my childhood that I would be, and I did become one. Um, but then at some point in my engineering career, I had the chance to start volunteering for football. So it pretty much started from as young as 18 to start going for football tournaments, volunteering for it. So that world kind of looked more let's say impact driven at an individual level. I felt that I was driving more impact in that space than working with machines in my engineering field. So I think I did the transition because of that. In 2015, when I did my first football tournament, which is part of the national games in India. And then, yeah, it's been a journey ever since then. I did the FIFA Under 17 World Cup when it happened in India. Then I worked for the Indian Super League, which is the top division men's professional league in India. But I think at some point in the past 7 years, it hit me that yes, men's football has got enough people there. Men's football has got like revenue and everything in place. What I really need to push my competencies is to help the women's game grow. So I wanted to do that transition from men's game to women's game. And I thought Europe is the right place to do it. So I've moved to this part of the world a year ago, looking how I can be part of the epicenter of football and see how to drive women's football. So pretty much that's been my journey over the 7 years, predominantly working for men's football and realizing, no, like as a woman, having experience doing competitions at that level, now it's time to move to the women's game and see what could be done. And yeah, and then I met Lucy through mutual friends and thought, why not, you know, combine my engineering skills and my passion for women's football together and do something that can help other women in this space to grow as a community. So that's pretty much been how my journey has been. And yeah, that's how Ready was born as well.
Yeah. So talk to us. Let's give it back to Lucy. Talk to us about the thought process that went into Ready and the vision behind Ready.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So actually, in parallel to my professional, personal work and life within football, I got exposed to cryptocurrencies through a colleague who was at a professional football club that I was working at, and he was, really down with an app with crypto coins and tokens, and I was just baffled. I had no idea what on earth he was talking about. But I guess it sparked my initial curiosity. And then really it was over the lockdown period of COVID, again, seeing it more in the news, just curious, really. And I started going to meetup groups, to events. There's quite a big community here in Barcelona, Web.3 community. And I realized that it was actually a lot more than simply digital currencies, right? But and so I got particularly drawn to different aspects of Web3, such as this regen space, which is thinking about regenerative economics and redefining what value means to include cultural value, social value, ecological value. There's a big talk within Web3 about public goods and investing in public goods. So big focus on social impact. And that's really what drew me to Web3 initially. And then I really went on this long journey of, I lost money. I was very confused. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of hype and confusing words. And I'm not from a tech background like Aisha here. So for me, it was a very painstaking journey, and leaning on friends who were much more versed and tech native than me. And it's been a real learning curve, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then really over the past year, as we're seeing more and more blockchain technologies enter into the field of sport, I started to zoom in on what was happening in my sector, at my club, in my sport, and really realizing that a lot of the innovation that has been happening in sport has been concentrated solely on top-end men's professional sport and driven largely by men. And case in point, when I was at a recent Web.3 in Sport Summit in London at Arsenal Football Club recently, and out of the probably 450 guests that were there, decision makers and leaders and executives from clubs and federations and brands and startups, there were 12 or 15 women in the entire room over the entire 2 days. And then I sort of put the two and two together, and really the world started, like, the interest in the technology and the social impact, and really a realization that this is another innovation. It's another set of tools, but we still need to do the work around being inclusive and purposeful and having pluralistic perspectives and opinions and expertise around the room to utilize these tools. So a few months ago, I thought, I'm going to write a course that was going to be a consolidation of all of the months, if not longer, of my learning. And it was going to be an introduction to Web3 with a focus on sport, and particular focus on the potential for women's sport, even though there's very little in women's sport. It's about 3 or 4 months ago. And I started writing it in quite a naive, and I'm just going to do this in my free time. And then I started talking to a few colleagues, friends and teammates, and was introduced to Aisha and mentioned, I'm writing this course. And there was a lot of interest, a lot of support. And I think people were drawn to it because I'm a non-tech person trying to transmit and translate this very confusing, jargony, hyped, volatile world to people like me, right? And then a few people around me were saying, I think there's more to this. I think there's something in this. And then I met Aisha, as she mentioned, through a common friend. And Aisha, of course, has been in crypto for years. She's a crypto trader. She's a tech native. And she took one look at my course and was like, man, we need to make this dope. And I'm on board with this, but here's what I can offer. And the two of us just hit it off from the get-go. We're a brilliant team. We have very complementary skills. And so we very organically brought together this concept, which was about, let's trigger curiosity and learning about innovation, tech, and Web3 to supercharge women's sport. Because we feel like if we don't do this, that Web3 is going to be another innovation where people in women's sport and women will be left behind again. And so it's another frontier that we're going to have to fight with our thinking. So we're all about having open conversations, workshops, courses, showcasing inspiration, projects, people, to try and get people to go on that learning journey that both Aisha and I have been on. And we've just launched. We're in the very early phases. Aisha can dig into the more technical aspects of Web3, because it's a term that's very new to some and very confusing to many. But that's really the origins of how Ready came about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Let's now just make it easy for the guys who are not familiar with Web3, Aisha. I think because you're the tech guru, as Lucy has said. So let's break it down. What is Web3 and the transition from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3 and its connection to sports so that the people who do not understand or who are not deep into tech can actually be like, oh, wow, that is what Web 3 is all about. You can break it down for us, Aisha.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Sean. Like, I'm not tech guru, I must say. I'm like, I know a little bit of what tech is, looking at the whole world. Yeah, but like you said, what Lucy mentioned is very correct. Not just within sport, in general, if you look at how Web3 space is growing, there's so much of gender gap that is building. Like, we already have traditionally a huge gender gap that we are all fighting together, and you don't want that to build in new areas, right? So I think our, let's say, vision and mission is to actually break that from happening. So yeah, so we want to explain things in very layperson's understanding format so that people don't feel the buzz around this, people don't feel like it's rocket science. So yeah, to start off with, let's look at Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, right? First of all, when Web 1 and Web 2 happened, no one called it Web 1 and Web 2. Suddenly, when this era just jumped off, people started calling it with a terminology, and people are like, oh my god, is this something, is this like Google, or is this like, what's happening, is it a new technology? So, like, no, when we started using Microsoft Office or MS-DOS, no one called it Web 1. So people didn't even know until you tagged it that there was Web 1, there was Web 2, and now Web 3 is happening. People didn't really get that transition communicated well. Yes, the transition happened. If you're a tech person, yes, you first had MS-DOS, then you started coding with other languages. Now you are on blockchain. That's very innate because we go to school, we go to college, we learn that as part of engineering. But for a normal person who's out there, who still uses internet and technology, this was not communicated well. So I think, I don't want to call it a failure, but that was like a wrong strategy from whoever thought of this transition, right? That it wasn't done rightly. And inclusivity is a question there, right? If you are doing something, I feel, irrespective of technology or any space, it is super important that you communicate it right. Because if I'm unaware of something, then I do not have access to it. Awareness in itself is the first decision making point of whether I'm interested, I'm curious, or do I want to do it, right? So looking at Web 1 was like, if I had to like cut it down to three things, think of Web 1 as something that you could only read. Like, there were things on the computer, which was like a device back then, and you looked into it and you could read something that was pre-done by people who were experts. You couldn't alter anything, or you couldn't be part of the system because it was read only. If you look at Web 2, a best example for that is social media, right? Which is, you could go create an account and you could write there. So it was read and write. So that is like stage 2 of it, where you had access, but you were more of a peripheral access. There was still a backend, someone was sitting and monitoring your data, but you still got a share, like you were there and you could write something and people could then read it. So you became kind of part of the community, but you were not solely responsible for who you were in that space. Now, Web 3 is read, write, and create, or let's call it own. Because in the Web 3 space, yes, I read what other people have done, I can write, which is I can be part of communities, and I can create my own communities, or I can decide how to run something that I want. So the sole responsibility of owning what I am is in my hands. And that is also why in the Web 3 space, there's a lot of inclusivity, because you are just a 32-bit character there. Like, it doesn't matter whether you are from Kenya or India or Barcelona. It doesn't matter what your color is. It doesn't matter what your heritage is. It doesn't matter what your race is. All of us are characters and codes there. And for blockchain as a technology, it does, like, blockchain doesn't know that if whether I was born in India or in Britain. For blockchain, me and the rest of you two are the same people, and we can do the same thing, right? We have access to the same thing. What I create, you two can create as well. So that is basically the underlying, let's say, foundational analysis that I can do, where one was read and write, and now what we are in is read, write, and build. And about how inclusive it is, because it considers everyone just like anybody else. So it's not even like we are not asking for equality. It is by default created with inclusivity and equality as the first basic principle. So yeah, and also, because you asked how is sport connected to this, we know that there's a lot of gatekeepers in the sports world. We know that sport has always been related to politics. Sport has always been related to problems in the society, which then gets migrated to sport. But what Web3 does is, because the space is inclusive, when like athletes or clubs or leagues or any sport entity of any size is equal to the blockchain. Like, blockchain doesn't care if you are 1,000-member federation or if you are a 10-member federation. When you are on there, when you're trying to build something, you're given equal privilege. So that is where this is a new way of looking at sport governance. This is a new way of giving exposure and platform to athletes of any size. Like, you could be a pro athlete at third division football, while you could also be, let's say, Marcus Rashford, and you could do the same thing, because the system looks at you as the same capacity or the same person, to call it that way. So, and that is where we see Web3 doing revolutionary stuff within football, or in general within sport, and looking at women's football, because often I consider women's football as a startup, because we are trying to innovate. We don't want to compete with the men, but we want to like really make changes so that it grows at its own pace. So I think, yeah, pretty much this is a quick go through that.
Lovely, lovely. I'm also getting to understand Web3. So when you talk about Web3, and I want to give up some examples, and Aisha and Lucy, you can help me with this. I saw, let's start in America, where we saw the NFL, allowed teams to partner with blockchain tech companies. And then you move still in America, in the NBA, crypto is the second highest spending sector in basketball. And we have seen also crypto being involved in motorsport, Formula One. And then we move all the way, so Formula One, around the world. And then we move all the way to, Serie A, where digital media platform OneFootball was named, the official video moments partner for the Serie A. And they are also looking to go into other leagues and all that. So talk to us now, break it down for us, Lucy, the impact of Web3 in women's football, how Ready is approaching that, and how also Ready is ready to help, partners, stakeholders, and everyone involved in the women's game.
Yeah, great. So, and thanks, Aisha, for that great foundational introduction to Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. So I categorize the application of Web3 in sport in four main ways. Right now, I think it's quite easy to work with like buckets, and I must say that in these four ways, they're not all being applied to women's sport right now. So first of all, we're seeing innovation of existing products, games, goods. So things like we're taking traditional merchandise or gaming or cards, trading cards, gaming cards, and we're making them digital. So innovating existing goods and services and games that we see in sport. The second one is, as I would see it, is unlocking new revenues for athletes, clubs, and leagues. And we're seeing, as you quite rightly said, Shon, NBA Top Shots. Creating these unique collectible NFTs based on epic basketball moments that people can own, they can trade. Athletes themselves being able to commercialize, monetize their own intellectual property, and enable their fans to have a financial stake and a supportive stake in the rise of that athlete, which is something that has never been done before in the Web2 era, where you have these centralized platforms that hold all of the value, financial value centrally. Now we have an opportunity whereby we can create distributed shared value among fans and supporters, and really for the first time ever, thanks to digital ownership on the blockchain. So unlocking new revenues, again, sponsorship, as I said, we're seeing Web3 companies, crypto exchanges all over the sport now, particularly in the US, as you said. The third area we're seeing Web3 is around fan engagement. Of course, socios.com is the number one fan token that has captured definitely the football market and has moved into other sports, which I think as a model has been really clever, right? Because it's recognized that you have clubs with their immediate fans in the stadium, and then millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions potentially fans around the world. And what the fan token offering does, not only is it providing revenue for clubs, but it's also recognizing that there's this layer of fans between sort of stadium and the sort of social media, one directional. I'm liking, I'm buying, I'm following, I'm watching, and so on. And it's creating an opportunity for those fans to have a connection and to have some fun perks and experiences and voting decisions on their club. So I think that as a model is super interesting to follow, and I think that's probably a quite an easy one for people to understand if you're following a club of any type. And then the fourth, so innovating existing products, unlocking new revenue for athletes, clubs, and federations, leagues. Third one, as I've just said, fan engagement and kind of building communities. And the fourth one, around ownership. So we are seeing instances whereby through new organizational structures that are available to us now thanks to blockchain technology, principally a decentralized autonomous organization whereby the rules and the dynamics and the governance are encoded, encrypted on the blockchain, and people buy in with NFTs or tokens, and there are different rules and structures. But we're increasingly seeing collectives of organizations looking at buying and owning sports properties in new and fascinating ways. So there's Kraus House DAO, which is a famous one, which has its ambitions to own an NBA basketball team in the future. We've got Lynx DAO, which is a huge community of golf fanatics looking to buy a golf course. So that's like what we see as like the four main ways right now that we see Web3 intersecting with sport. I think for sport right now, I get the feeling that for any decision maker working in sport, it must be such a difficult decision thinking about what to do, reputation, what will my fans think? It's really not the right thing to do to try to just commercialize fans through NFTs, for example. There's all of these decisions that who do we partner with? What's going to be the backlash? That I don't envy anyone having to make these strategic decisions. And so we're seeing clubs, disproportionately men's top-end professional clubs, pouring in money into building Web3 strategy teams, thinking about their metaverse experiences, which again is another potentially in bucket 3, fan engagement. And I just don't think it's a very easy position for clubs. Some clubs have done things very, very well, and other clubs have received a lot of backlash, right? And maybe we know who those are without wanting to name names. I think for women's football in particular, so when I speak to a lot of my colleagues and friends across women's football, they feel very far from this. The language used, the fact that it's like the guys talking about metaverse over there, that there are just 50,000 other priorities for women's football. And what I say, though, is that ironically, Aisha and I believe that actually women's football, people in women's football and people in women's sport are super well positioned to actually capitalize and think through what might be some of these tools for us. Because, and we say this in our spiel about Ready, like innovation in women's sport is nothing new, right? So people in women's sport and women's football have been innovating for decades and being creative and resourceful and solution oriented. So we feel like that the minute that we speak to anybody, and we were actually at the Equality Summit in London a few days ago. We did a session on Web.3 and the potential for women's sport, and we spoke to different people running football initiatives, women's football initiatives in Africa, in Australasia, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the US. And when we spent time and sort of talked about it in our language, it was like the penny dropped. People got it. They were like, oh, wow. Like the systemic challenges that we face, maybe there's something in this, because we believe in creating distributed shared value, or we believe in sidestepping or overcoming gatekeepers that gatekeepers in sport and football is a real problem, right? It's gatekeepers in sports education. Who gets to afford? Who gets? They basically say who is allowed, who is not. There's a filtering. So gatekeepers, some of these institutions that exist in sports, continue, governance issues and so on, really hinder women's sport and women's football. So when we speak to people across women's football, it's not that, it kind of comes naturally to think about this as maybe another innovation for us. And what Aisha and I are saying is, like, don't jump into something you don't know. Come with us on a learning journey. We're talking about innovation. We're talking about tech. We're talking about Web3 as another form of innovation, as another form of technology. But really, learning is key, because what we are seeing is so many clubs and people in sports who are going in sort of quite blind, and there's a lot more to the Web3 space than dropping an NFT for your fan base.
Yes, thank you for that, Lucy. And we'll come back to you, Aisha, and you can talk to us about, the event in London and, just the impact on the ground. But before we go to that, let's quickly just remind our viewers that the Athens Women's Football Summit will be held in Athens, Greece on the 22nd and 23rd, literally 50 days to this event. As you can see on your screen, you can scan that code, and you can there's a discount also on that, and get more details about the event. Don't forget, women's football is the greatest movement in sport and also an opportunity to celebrate the beautiful game. And that is what we at Athens Women's Football Summit are doing. And we want you to come and experience. Here's where you'll meet, stakeholders, you'll meet people of the beautiful game, the players who have been on the pitch and who understand everything they have to go through, former players, and who'll be talking about their transition. This is where everything will be happening, and you need to get tickets to that. It will be also available online. So it'll be both physical and online, and so that everyone across the world can be catered for. That discount code we'll be posting them everywhere on our social media accounts. Now let's just cross over to you, Aisha. Talk to us. Lucy has mentioned about people just coming to slowly coming to understand the power and the impact of Web3. And right today we're talking about women's football and the impact on that. Talk to us how the London event went down and the exact pointers that actually brought that light to the people who attended.
Yeah, sure. Like Lucy was mentioning, when we looked, like we personally wanted to also analyze whether the product that we are trying to, or the service that we are trying to build, is there a need for it, right? So, I mean, we didn't do like a market research, but we went across the people we know in the industry, men, women, people from all sector, from federations to clubs to students currently doing sports management courses, to understand what are the barriers that they felt, right? And most of the time, the answer was no one told us what it was. And personally, both of us had the same journeys. Like Lucy had to knock her own doors to figure out someone to help her. 5 years ago, when I first heard about Bitcoin and trading and all of that, it was like a bunch of 5 boys standing at a water cooler discussion and talking about this. So I had to like barge in saying, listen, I also want to know what you're talking. So they said, no, it's different. It's complicated. You're not going to get it. But I'm like, okay, cool. But like, how did you decide I won't get it even before you told me what it is? So they said, no, you need to have experience in stock market, and they had like a lot of excuses. But yeah, like I'm not saying it from a wrong concept, but they that's the same group who then taught me how to do this. So like sometimes we have to do that extra, like we know there's a door, but sometimes we have to like break the door and be ready for it. So when we realized that, then we wanted to understand from others what the problem was. So I think at the summit, this is exactly what happened. In a room when we did it, a workshop, we had men, we had women, and we also had them from different sectors. We had someone who's a journalist at a big newspaper in the US, in Britain, while we also had women running clubs. We had women having experience in sports tech, but not Web3 as such. And we also had like ex-players, like who wanted to know how can they now use the Web3 space. And everybody came out saying one thing, which is we didn't know what this was. We just kept hearing it. Like they hear the word every single day. They hear Web3, they hear NFT, they hear cryptocurrency. Like it's inevitable not to hear about it every day, because it's on social media, it's on the newspaper. When you walk, you see like some ad, like in London, you get on a tube, there's like 3 crypto ads on it. So it's inevitable that you don't see it. But the problem is no one told them what it is. And when they tried getting information on the internet, the problem was when we had access to schools, Web 1 was there. Like we were taught how to use a computer in school. Most of the generation that's living today was like we're taught in the school on how to use a floppy disk. Let's go back to those days. But even Web 2 was like a peer learning. Like Facebook came out, someone used it, someone told you how to use it, and there was like a self-learning journey, and it was user friendly. Like there was a guidebook on how to sign up on Facebook, there was a guidebook of what do you do on Instagram. But with Web 3, what happened is it just came in, and then people just started like making like a closed loop, let's call it. It's like some of the sport uh, industries, right, where it's so close that I don't know where the key to the door is, or I don't even know what the door is made of for me to even decide how much force I need to put to break it. So I think this is exactly what the response that we got from every single person who was at the workshop. And when we like put 4 to 5 slides on just breaking down what this space is and how can it actually help sport, and NFT just being one of, let's say, 10 different solutions, people were like, okay, now this makes sense. Like I used to collect paninis, now I'm going to collect digital collectibles because I don't have space in my house. Like all of us live in such minimalistic way these days that you can't keep collecting all of this. We might have like one photo in a Polaroid as a memory, but we have 10,000 clicks of an event on our iCloud storage, right? So like, it is important to tell people this little connections. Like it like keep saying this, it is not rocket science at all. Like if I and Lucy can learn it, everybody here can learn it. It's just that there's no one to tell them, and there's no place to go read about it. Yes, Google is the answer to most of the things, but the problem is on Google it is written in very complex format, and you can't really blame. This is like, imagine you want to read about the Mars mission and some NASA scientist has written it, right? So he's writing from his thought process, so you're going to read like very big words that if you're not in the aerospace like background, you don't understand it. So we don't really know who to blame, but there's a lot of people to blame because someone wrote it so complex that now it's difficult for people to Google and read about it. And there's no what to say, existing literature, let's put it that way. So what we are trying to do is create existing literature from our journeys of going and breaking doors and knocking doors and getting rejected and getting like, okay, like what's happening, you don't know. So I think our first response to from the Equality Summit was, listen, this workshop has made us curious, tell us more. Tell us when the course is coming, tell us how much can we learn in this course. And 3 people I particularly remember came and told me that even if I have to make a decision whether I'm interested in this space or not, I need to know what it is. So just to take that informed decision, you need to be informed first. So we are not telling that, come on, all the women's football people, come jump into Web 3. No, all of you don't have to jump into Web 3. Web 3 is just a tool. And sometimes there's also this notion that Web 3 is going to change football. Like even in men's football, you often hear that tagline on social media, Web 3 is here to change the world. No, Web 3 is just like, the microwave you have in your kitchen. It's just another tool to do one particular thing. You still have to play 90 minutes, you still have to score goals. All of that is going to happen. So I feel like We are here to help. Are we great
Mhm.
at it? No, we are also on that learning curve. So we keep telling that this is co-learning and co-teaching. So
Yeah.
when we do this course, someone's going to teach us about what their experience at a federation for 10 years has been, and we might learn from it to then reiterate our course. So this is going to be a dynamic process of two of us and a bunch of community that we are going to build, our advisors, our founding members, teaching. So there's co-teaching and then there's co-learning, because we want this to be a peer-to-peer, very inclusive community where anybody feels safe and doesn't feel threatened with these like big jargon words. So yeah, so I think this is a recap of how the summit was, and what the response from the summit was. Like, the summit was a reassurance that
Mhm.
yeah, you should go ahead, like you're doing the right thing and you're in the right journey.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's just, because we are approaching towards the end of the session, Lucy, in what ways can the club stakeholders and everyone in women's football adapt to Web3, and how is Ready helping, the stakeholders and the people and the individuals, also teams involved, to just, make, this transition, which is still, as Aisha says, it's people are still slowly, warming up to it.
Yeah, so I think first off, we're a new project. We just launched a few weeks, if a month or so ago. It's very organic. We are we've obviously produced, and we're about to launch this course soon. So we would encourage our women's football community to check out the course as a starting point. And it's really no prior knowledge needed. So whether you're, from a broadcaster, media, club, federation, student, fan, interested, it really is introductory and hopefully digestible. That would definitely be a first port of call. I think also with time, we hope to be showcasing what is out there, right? So there's some really cool, innovative stuff happening in tech and Web3 space, in sport, that we can either adapt ideas for our respective women's football context or club, and hopefully we will see more stuff happening in women's football and women's sport that is driven by Web3. I think that's inevitable. There's more interest and more eyes on Web3 than ever. So we're looking forward to that as well. We are running workshops, educational sessions, tailored cohort groups as well. So if you are a club that is interested in an educational session, please get in touch with us. But I think the message that I would give is that there's no need to panic, that this technology is not going away. It's emerging, and you're not late. And I think it shouldn't thwart and overwhelm everything else you're doing. Just keep with your strategy, keep with your operational plan, keep with your good governance, keep with your social impact, or whatever it is you're doing, and then potentially there's room for an aspect of this tech and Web3 in future. But don't go crazy and don't think, FOMO. One example that I really like is Angel City Football Club. Obviously, women-founded women's professional soccer team in LA. Newly launched season a few months ago. They're doing so much stuff on the pitch, off the pitch, with their supporters clubs, with their global fan base, memberships. And when they did their first ever kickoff match, it was an inaugural kickoff of the season, they launched an inaugural NFT that they airdropped for free to fans who kind of in a very simple way registered. And what I liked about that, it was that it was almost like they were subtly giving a nod to this phenomenon, enabling fans to kind of get curious about, maybe I can get a free NFT that's like an Angel City FC, that NFT, that's cool. And they've also since claimed that they will pair that free drop with education. And I think that's a great way to to engage a section of the fan base that's interested. Of course, not all fans are going to be interested. Not all fans went for the drop either, and that's fine. And the communication around it wasn't all centered on this wild drop. It was the players, the owners, the social impact, the foundation, the community department, the match. Oh, and by the way, we have an inaugural NFT to celebrate the first league, and I really like that. It was like a subtle, potentially low risk, kind of inciting a little bit of curiosity among Angel City fans and members. So yeah, I think that would be my message for the women's football community.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as we wrap up, Aisha, your last words and just what you want to see when it comes to Web3 and Ready and the future of technology in women's football.
I think the reason why I have always been attracted to technology from a very young age was technology made me look equal to everybody else in my society. I could use technology the same way someone else could, but I couldn't use, let's say, a facility in my society like other people could. Like the tennis court was only for premium people. The cricket club was only something that, like upper middle class could access. So for me, I think that is like the underlying fact to why I think technology has the power to change things. But there is a learning curve. I am a self-taught technology person. Yes, I do have a mechanical engineering background, but core internet and technology is something that I learned from Google, from YouTube, from people I know. So I think, so when we look at women's football, like I said, we have the time and the right set of people to actually innovate things. Like I said, we are not here to compete with something that we call the men's football, which has been existing for 100 years. Yes, let them do whatever they want in their own fashion. But we have the potential as a bunch of men, women, non-binary people to come together and drive innovation through digital experiences. Now, when we talk about Web3 again, like Lucy said, and like how Angel FC did, like both of us really like it, and I own one of those airdropped NFTs, is that it was so subtle and they didn't focus on it. They said, this is one, like if you're an owner or if you're a fan, you get so many other things, and this is just an addition to it. But they use digital media. They have a Discord channel for all the members. They send us newsletters. Like even a club sending you a newsletter is a digital experience, or a club making sure that you don't have to print a ticket because now all of us have smartphones and you just scan it. For me, that in itself is a digital means. And anybody who has a smartphone has the same accessibility. But imagine, like, simple way, you have color printer at your house and I have black and white printer. The ticket that we are going to print is going to look different. We might not think of this, right? Like, this is so silly. But just because a colored ink is more expensive than black and white ink, or just because you have a printer at home and I might not even have a printer, so I have to give like 50 cents to take that printout, even there we don't see this thing, but there is discrimination because of what we have access to. But on a smartphone, a barcode is a barcode. Like Sean's barcode and my barcode and Lucy's barcode is all going to look the same on the screen. So we don't think of these small things that technology does to make things inclusive. And this is exactly the way that we have to look forward to women's sport. We want every woman to use this as an opportunity to be independent, because there's a question of financial access in women's sport. Like brands don't want to put their millions here, they want to put their millions there. But let's look at why would a brand want to put 2 million, right? So I think we can do a bit of reverse engineering and then see how do we get there. Like, what is that the brand needs? Like if it's a maternity wear, let's bring athlete women who are pregnant, who give birth and still go play on the pitch. Like, why isn't a maternity brand not coming for them and rather going for a celebrity with a plastic bump, right? Like, we need to question these things and get them here and tell them, listen, use the reach that these athletes have on social media. People are ready to buy their NFTs, or people are ready to have like an immersive digital experience, a live stream with that athlete if she could share how her maternity journey has been. So I feel like we need to do that reverse engineering, and not just Web3, Web1, Web2, Web3. All of this could be used. So yeah, I think I really want to end by saying that digital to me, or technology, let's just call it technology, to me takes away all the barriers that traditional society or traditional setup that we are born into, or sometimes people call it your fate. No, like technology tells me my fate doesn't decide what I'm up to. So yeah, I think for me technology, that's what technology is done, and that technology can do that to everybody. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Aisha. Lucy, a few final words as we wrap up.
Just really to celebrate this session, actually, because I think, Athens Women's Football Summit series has a finite number of series, and you've chosen to invite us and this topic. So first of all, thank you very much. And Shon, thank you for spending this time with us. We're very much looking forward to being at the summit as well. And really just to say, as Aisha said, that we're on a learning journey as well. We don't have all the answers. We still haven't seen a lot of this stuff appear and happen in women's football, but we want to see it, and we want to support and leverage our networks and our contacts and know-how and assets that we're building to help people on that journey. So we're very approachable, we're very contactable on social media, or if you're in London or Barcelona, where Aisha and I both are, we are always up for a coffee. and really just to say that, and to thank you to Athens Women's Football Summit. Really excited to have the in-person summit happening again, and that you're thinking about innovation and social innovation to boost women's football and to keep it on a positive momentum, building on the successes from South Africa and England recently. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aisha and Lucy, for just joining us. At this point, we must all agree, I think everything is going digital. Also in this rapidly changing world, and just from this discussion, I think we have no choice, especially the stakeholders in the women's football, but to try and adapt in the swiftest way possible, because this would go steps ahead to help all the women who are involved, and we are also trying to do it in, as Aisha said, in a different way than the men's game. Innovation, embracing innovation, and all that. And thank you all for just agreeing for this, to be part of this show, where we've got to discuss the future of technology in women's football. And I think so many people have also come to understand what exactly is Web.3 and the exact specifics, how we can gain when we invest in women's football. So thank you so much, Lucy Mills, for everything you're doing out there, and Aisha, Nazia, both co-founders at Trady. I can't wait to also meet you in person and we continue this conversation. I wish we had like 3 or 4 hours, because it's a very broad topic, but I know one day people will get to understand. As both of you mentioned, it's easy for people to just access you on social media. So get going. Lucy Mills, Aisha, Nazia, you can start on LinkedIn. It's a very lovely platform where people get to connect and talk about various issues here and there when it comes to women's football. Thank you once again. And that is all we had for you today. In our first show of the Athens Women's Football Series, which is live on Facebook and YouTube. Just before we wrap up, one more thing. We'll be live in Athens, Greece on the 22nd and 23rd of September. If you want to get to be part of that, you can just look at your screen, scan that code, and you'll get all the information. Visit our social media pages. For that information, there's so many people who are working behind the scenes. We have Ed Bowers, who's there, the director. He's working behind the scenes and, part of the organization team. We have Marius, we have Naomi, everyone, Agis, we have everyone just, making sure that you can get to be part of this summit. You can get to be part of this football series where you can get to learn more. It is free. It is on YouTube. It is on Facebook. So thank you, everyone who has joined us today. That is all we had from us here at Athens Women's Football Series. See you next Wednesday. I'm Shon Osimbo.